Hey everyone, I'm Coach Shippies and I've been a professional top laner or head coach for the past 8 years. During this time I've reached Worlds and MSI multiple times. Now I'm a full-time coach with a ton of passion towards helping players unlock their potential and climb to their dream rank. Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to be covering everything you need to know about how to learn and master Darius. But before we begin, I just wanted to give a special shout out to Dragoon. And for those of you who don't know him, he is a challenger Darius made from NA and one of the only people brave enough to play this champion in competitive year after year, and he somehow always manages to make it work. And he was kind enough to have an in-depth conversation with me and essentially open my eyes to the finer details about what truly makes someone a Darius master, and it really helped me throughout the course of making this guide, so I appreciate him a lot for that. But yeah, let's not waste any more time and we'll get started. First up, we're going to be covering the runes, and on Darius you're going to be running the Conqueror page every single game. And you may have seen some pro players run Phase Rush or even Lethal Tempo, but I recommend just sticking with Conqueror, because Phase Rush is not very useful, because Darius's problem is not sticking onto people. He's a 90% slow on his W, he's got a hook, you've got Ghost, even Stride Breaker later on. Once you're on top of the enemy champion, you don't really need any help staying onto them, but getting onto them is the problem. But Phase Rush doesn't help with that at all, and you're really going to miss the damage you gain from Conqueror, because Darius has such good AD scalings, even its passive scales with AD, so you're really going to miss not having Conqueror, and Lethal Tempo is just not that useful. Because while you're stacking your 5 stacks to get your passive off, the only time Lethal Tempo is going to help is on the 5th stack. Because if you think about it, auto WQ, and then while the Q animation's going off, your auto is coming back off cooldown, you get the 4th auto down, and then the Lethal Tempo attack speed is only going to help for that 5th auto, and once your passive is stacked anyway and you're ulting, you're going to want the AD, and even in teamfights, you don't really just beat people down with auto attacks, you really just stack off one guy and then flash onto the backline, so Lethal Tempo is just not that useful, so I recommend staying with Conqueror every single time. And as for the runes you'll be taking, I'll go through each of them one by one to really help you optimize when to take each one, starting off with Triumph. You'll be running this rune every single game, because Darius doesn't really have mana problems, so you're really going to prefer taking Triumph, as it's going to help you on 1v2, 1v3s, or even any skirmish situation. You'll be getting a lot of value from this rune, and because Presence of Mind mana is not that useful on your champ, Triumph is going to be worth taking every single time. And as for the second rune, you'll be running either Alacrity or Tenacity. I know a lot of people just default to taking Tenacity as it can feel quite nice, not being stunned on Darius, but you really need to see the enemy team comp, because Alacrity feels really good as well, having the extra attack speed for stacking your passive, and even once it's stacked, getting the damage down is of course going to feel very smooth, especially for comboing as well, but you will need to take Tenacity in games where it's good, so games where they have a lot of CC that is affected by Tenacity. Champs like Amumu, champs like Sejuani, champs like Leona, these champions have a ton of CC in their kit, so you'll definitely need to run Tenacity versus them and other champs like them, but if they just have knockups or not that much CC in general, then I recommend going for Alacrity. And as for the last rune, you'll be taking Last Stand every single game. Coup de Grace actually doesn't work on Darius' ulti as it's a true damage spell, so you find you're not going to get a lot of use out of that one. And as for Cut Down, you'll be building a lot of HP on Darius, so that rune is not useful either. And Last Stand will just give you a ton of value across all your games, so I recommend taking this one every time. Moving on to the secondary runes, we actually have a bit more variety this time, but we'll start with the Resolve Tree, where you'll be running either Second Wind or Bone Plating depending on matchup. Second Wind is of course best in matchups where they can poke you from afar. Champs like Jace, champs like Ken, and even champs like Ornn where they can hit you from far away. Second one will get a ton of value, and Bone Plating is best in matchups where they can't do that. Champions that have to all in you, champs like Garen, Jax, Riven, where they can't really poke you unless they're already on top of you, and that's where Darius thrives. He doesn't really like short trades, he prefers all in, so Bone Plating you'll be taking more often on Darius and looking for these big all ins. And as for the second rune, you'll be running Unflinching most of the time, as Darius really uses the early game tenacity quite well, but you will be running Demolish in some situations. Matchups where you find they're quite free, or you're versus tanks in general, you can run Demolish with Second Wind and play for tower plates and proxying, because most of the time, when you play a free matchup or versus a tank, if you're not super confident in your wave control, letting the wave come back into you, running them down in that angle, then they're just going to let the wave come back into them, they're going to be farming it under tower, and if you have Demolish, you now have the option to proxy between the towers, proc Demolish when it's up, and run at the enemy jungle or take a base with the good tempo for proxying. And Darius doesn't really do a ton of damage to towers early on, but if you have Demolish, it's really going to help you get these plates down and these free matchups where they're playing quite scared. Now, the alternative you can take for secondary runes is actually the Inspiration Tree, and this is one that I really like taking because having Cosmic Insight on Darius feels so good, because this champion is very summon spell reliant. You need your flash, you need your ghost to team fight most of the time, so having Cosmic Insight is going to have it up more often, and especially in lane when you trade your ghost flash for your lane opponent's flash, if you have Cosmic Insight, not only is your ghost going to be up before their flash, but your flash will be up as well, so your kill threat is going to be so much higher with this rune. And then as for the other end, you'll be taking either cookies or boots. Cookies, you'll only take in games where you want to be rushing tier 2 boots, but if not, you should be taking free boots and getting the free 300 gold. And then the times I would take this page are in matchups where it's quite free. I don't really need second win bone plating that much. And also, I want to be playing more for kills than for tower plates. So if I was in a free matchup where a champion like Sion, for example, where if I play for a kill, he's just going to clear the wave and he's always going to be a meatball no matter what, then of course I'll probably run the Demolish page. But if I'm in a free matchup like Garen, where I really want to be sitting him behind as he scales quite well, but he's quite weak early, and the matchup's quite free, I can beat him without bone plating pretty handily, then in matchups like that, I'll be taking the Cosmic Insight and the Inspiration page in general. Up next, we're going to be covering Summoner spells, which is pretty straightforward on Darius, to be honest, as you're just going to be running Ghost and Flash almost every single game. Darius is quite an immobile champion. You don't have any movement speed steroid, you don't have any gap closer, so having Flash and Ghost together is really going to help nullify that weakness. However, there are some situations where I'll be taking Ignite and Flash, and that situation is versus a dive comp. So let's say, for example, they have Hecarim jungle, Yone mid, Nautilus support. That comp has to go into you. So Ghost is not that useful because you don't have to stick onto people, you don't have to chase them down, they come into you, and in that situation, especially in games where you have a volatile top matchup, you can take Ignite. So let's say you're versus Riven, you're versus Jax, Fiora. Having Ignite can be very good in those matchups, of course, but most of the time it's not worth sacrificing the scaling of Ghost because your champion can't really teamfight very well without it most of the time. But if you're versus a dive comp and you're in a volatile matchup, then you don't really need the Ghost, so Ignite can be very valuable in that situation, but for the most part, you will be running Ghost and Flash together. Up next, we're going to be covering the item builds, and on Darius, I recommend for your starting item to prioritize Doran's Blade over Doran's Shield whenever you can. Now, of course, in some matchups, you will need the shield, high poke lanes such as Kennen or Jace, or even champions like GP, which have a very low cooldown spell that they're going to be poking you with. Of course, you will just need Doran's Shield regen in that situation. However, on Darius, the way you want to be trading is not taking these little short trades where Doran's Shield will have a ton of value. You ideally want to be taking long, extended all-in trades, so Doran's Blade is going to give you the most value by far, and I found more often than not in games where I build Doran's Shield versus melee champions, I regretted it almost every single time, so I heavily recommend you prioritize the Doran's Blade. Moving on to your first buy, and in my opinion this is the hardest part about itemizing on Darius, but if you can get to 1100 gold before you base, you're going to be feeling pretty good, because tier 2 boots rush feel amazing on this champion, especially in games where you're versus ranged champions or same damage mix, top jungle. Then Ninja Tabs of course is very good versus AD top jungle and Merc versus AP top jungle, but even if they're mixed, the boots still feel really good from the way your champion wants to be playing. And as for Iron Spike Whip, you'll be building this in situations where you're versus a champion that's going to be diving onto you anyway, so the movement speed is not as valuable from the tier 2s, and then they have mixed damage top jungle, so the armor or the MR is not as valuable. In that situation, you can be building Iron Spike Whip with your 1100. But most of the time, realistically, you're not going to be getting 1100 gold, and in that situation, you'll be building either Pickaxe or Double Longsword. Now, I really like Double Longsword because it gives you more money for refillable, and also it's more flexible. It can build into all three of Darius's mythic options, which we'll cover soon, but it gives you more options essentially than building Pickaxe. Now you have to build Stride or Gore. Now, as for the other items, if you don't have enough money for Pickaxe or Double Long, most of the time, if you have Doran's Blade, you want to be prioritizing defensive stats. So Ruby Crystals, Cloth Armor, stuff like that. Cloth can feel pretty good because that means your Ninja Tabs are only 800 gold now, but early HP feels amazing on this champion, especially if you already have the AD from Doran's Blade. But if you had to go shield in this game, then I would prioritize going longswords in that situation. With that being said though, it does depend on what's happening in the game. You don't always go defensive stats with Doran's Blade and offensive with Shield. It really depends on the game state. So let's say, for example, that you've killed your lane opponent and the wave is coming back into you and they have no flash, and you've got your ghost up. In that situation, of course, even if you have D-Blade, you'll be building extra longswords to really help with your all-in threat, because you're in a position to really punish your opponent. But let's say the flip, where the wave's going towards them, or they have a freeze outside their tower even, because they TP'd back, caught the wave, then in that situation, if you use your sums especially to kill them, then you definitely need to prioritize defensive stats. And as for boots, the only time I'd prioritize tier 1 boots over the resist, so over the cloth armor or the null magic, is in situations where you're versus a ranged champion and the movement speed is going to help you a lot. And then as for tier 2 boots, we already covered most of them, but for swiftness boots, I'd only really build this in matchups like Nasus or Olaf, where the slow resist are going to be quite useful, especially if they have other slows in their team. That's really going to make me build that, but for the most part, you will be building the tier 2s that give you resist, Ninja Tabbies or Merc Treads. Moving on to your first item, and on Darius you're going to always be rushing your Mythic, and most of the time you're going to be building either Stridebreaker or Triforce, where Stridebreaker feels the best in cases where you're versus either a ranged champion in lane, or a champion where the slowing effect's going to be quite good and help you kite them, so a matchup like Jax, where if you slow them when they jump onto you, it can be very easy for you to space out their E and then re-engage, or in any just ranged champ in general, or even if you versus a melee champ in lane where the slow's not that good, if they have a bunch of ranged champs in their comp anyway, Stridebreaker will feel very, very powerful. And as for Triforce, the problem with Triforce is the build path feels terrible. Sheen, Kindle, Halfbound X, all of them do not feel that good on Darius, so you'll mainly be building the components, the rubies, the longswords that you can get it, but this item feels very, very good if you're snowballing, because it's going to speed you up to having the completed item, of course, and once you have it, it's going to feel extremely powerful. And even in games where you're not snowballing, I'd still build Triforce when you just know there's no way you're going to be able to teamfight. In a game where, for example, if they had Bronzodia, Malphite, Orianna, Mumu, something like that, and your team comp just had terrible teamfighting, champions like Nidalee, champions like Twisted Fate, you just know there's no way I'm going to be teamfighting this game, I need to be winning the side, so going Triforce and probably even Hullbreaker later on, it's going to feel very good. Because Darius doesn't actually do that much damage to towers, but with Triforce, you really start to one-shot them, especially with your W later on, because Darius's E, the armor pin, actually works on towers as well. So if you have Triforce Hullbreaker for that build, you're really going to be a menace in the side lane. But most of the time, you will be going Stridebreaker because a lot of champions you verse will be range, especially your counter picks in lane will be range, and also this item is just more consistent and the build path feels better because you can get Pickaxe and Iron Spike whip early on. And then as for Gore Drinker, I'd only build this in situations where you're versus a high melee comp, of course, 3 or 4 melee champions, and also when you need to be the frontline for your team. So let's say you have a Graves jungle, range mid, range support, everyone on your team is just range. You don't really have a choice. You have to be the frontline for your team. But you don't want to be building a tank mythic. That doesn't feel very good on Darius. You want to be hitting the middle ground between tanky and bruiser, where Gore Drinker hits just that, but the problem with that, you have to be versing melees as well. So it's pretty rare that you're going to be building it, but the times it is good, it feels quite nice. So just keep a lookout for a bunch of melee champs and no melees on your team comp, basically, no frontline on your team. But for the most part, you will be defaulting between Triforce and Stridebreaker. Moving down to your second item, where most of the time you will be deciding between either Sterak's or Hullbreaker, depending on the game state, where Sterak's is a very, very good middle ground between being strong inside and being strong in teamfights, so I would default to this if you're ever unsure. However, in games where you want to be playing side lane, so either your team can't really win a teamfight, your team comp might suck, or your team might be behind, or in games where you can build the Hullbreaker and it's really going to help elevate your side lane pressure to the next level. So for example, let's say you're versus a Malphite, where if you're keeping him stuck under the tier 2, and he can clear the wave easily with E and W, but if you were to build Hullbreaker, and especially if you've got Demolish, and even more especially if you have Triforce compared with Hullbreaker, feels very good, now all of a sudden you can break the tower in front of him because he has to deal with the Hullbreaker empowered creep. Games like that, Hullbreaker can feel very powerful, but I wouldn't just build this without a clear game plan in mind. If you're ever unsure what to build, Sterak's is the best. And then as for more, I'd be building this in games where they have a lot of AP champions, because it's not a full tank item, you're still getting a bit of AD from the more, but it doesn't feel as good as Sterak's, so I'd only build it versus very heavy magic damage comps. And then for Deadman's Plate, I see a lot of people tunnel on this because Darius, of course, a mobile champion, they like building move speed on him, but this is only good in games where they have a really high range comp, and no one's really going to be diving onto you. You can't really play the front to back option that you want to be doing. So for Deadman's Plate, it can help you reach the backline, but they have to have a pretty high AD comp as well, so it's pretty rare that you'll build this. And then as for Randuins, it's just in games where they have multiple crit champions. So either Tristana, Yasuo, or Yone mid, or even a GP top with a crit AD, then Randuins can feel very good, but most of the time, like I said, it will be either Sterak's or Hullbreaker. Moving down to your third item, where if you don't have Sterak's by now, it's never going to be a bad choice, but I recommend not stacking Sterak's and Hullbreaker together, because essentially they're just the same item. They're both HP and AD, of course they have different passives, but if you're ever in a teamfight situation, you're not going to have any resist, where most of the time on Darius you're going to be looking to itemize your resist from this point in the game. You're going to have enough damage, especially when you're scaling, that you just want to be as tanky as possible, so most of the time you're building a tank item, and Stoneplate feels really good because you're going to be getting a bit of armor from it as well, but a ton of MR, and also of course the shield feels quite nice on Darius, but if you just want to itemize straight MR, then Abyssal Musk feels one of the best because the passive is quite OP on this, where it's going to allow your team to do more damage, and also the build path's very good. Getting a whole Negatron Cloak for 900 gold is of course going to be giving you a ton of MR early as a nice spike, and then as for Spirit Visage, I'd only build this in games where you have enchanters on your team, where that's going to help the healing. Champs like Soraka, of course, it can be quite good, but very rarely would I build this. Most of the time it will be between the other three, and Force of Nature is in games where they have a lot of consistent AP damage. So champs like Cassiopeia, it can be very good, but most of the time you will be on either Stoneplate or Abyssal Musk. And then as for the armor options, I'd only really stack armor in games where they're very, very heavy AD comps, or the AP champs are playing quite poorly. But by the time you have 3 items, most of the time you will want a bit of MR. But if you don't need it, then you can go Death Stance in this game. I don't like Death Stance as a second item because you have no HP. But since you've already got Sterex or Hullbreaker most likely from that point, Death Stance can feel quite good. And then the conditions are the same for Randreds, multiple crit champs, and Thornmail if you really need the healing cup. And to round off your build with the 4th and 5th items, most of them are the same and they have the same situation for when you build each one. However, there is a variable where Spear of Shojin pops up, and that's just because when you're building your 4th and 5th items, a lot of the time you will have armor and MR by now, and stacking a lot of the same resist. Of course, it has diminishing returns, so in some games you might feel you don't need more armor, you don't need more MR, and you might actually want more damage. And in that situation, Spear of Shojin is going to fit in quite nicely, as it gives you HP as well, not just pure damage, so it gives you a little bit of tankiness, but you're not overstacking on one type of resist. And to finish off, I'll show you guys some examples of what your full build should be looking like, and I don't recommend just blindly copying this item for item. It really depends on how your game is going and what champions are in the game. However, if you do, it's probably going to be fine. So if you're just learning the champion at the start and you don't want to be putting too much time into your builds, then copying it's going to be fine. But as you grow and develop your mastery on the champion, of course you should be learning and figuring out the best situation to build each item. Up next, we're going to be covering level 1s. Now, Darius is one of the strongest level 1s in the game, and you really want to be abusing that fact. Where if you're on blue side, you have the option to take over the tri-bush level 1, and if you're on red side, you want to be sitting in the tier 3 lane bush, the third bush in the lane, and trying to get behind your lane opponent level 1, and really start to stack onto him. And if you can get your passive going level 1, then in a lot of situations you'll be able to kill them, or at the very least chunk them enough that the lane is now over, and then you'll be able to zone them from XP. But here in this situation, I take over the tri, and if he walked back to lane, I would have flanked him, but here he came back to lane from leashing, and I was able to all-in him and get my passive down, and now his lane's completely over. He can't get XP, and if he tries, he's just going to die for it, like in this situation. Now, his lane, right, is completely over, not because I did anything fancy mechanically, but purely because I knew my level 1 is stronger, I want to be looking to get behind him or get on top of him level 1, and that's exactly what I did. Now for my next example, it's not going to be quite so easy as the last one, where this game I'm not versus Sion, I'm versus a Ghost Barrier Olaf, where he of course is a very strong level 1 champion as well, so because I saw that and I saw he took Barrier as well, I didn't really skill W, I skilled Q to guarantee push and poke him down, and I'm not going to be taking it all in unless I dodge his spell. That's what I've thought about when I came to this lane. If I can dodge out his Q, of course I can win the all in, but if not, his Q cooldown of course much lower than my cooldowns if he picks it up, then I'm going to lose. So here I dodge 2 Qs, dodge the third one, and now it's over. Now I pop Ghost and instantly all in him, because I know I've dodged his key spell, this all in is over, but if I were to have ran at him from the start, even if I skill W, there's a very good chance I lost that. And I recommend you to do that in all your Darius games. Have a clear game plan level 1, and execute on it, and it might go poorly, it might go well, but you're going to be learning from it as you go, and you'll learn what works and what doesn't, and you're really going to start pushing the limits of what you can achieve level 1 on this champion. And another example of something you can do level 1 is you can actually attack the enemy jungler level 1 depending on the game. And in this case, I'm versus an Aatrox top and a Karthus jungle, where Karthus jungle of course very strong level 1, but Aatrox is not. So here, as you saw, I lied in wait in the jungle, and I made sure I didn't start off the situation as a pure 2v2 or 3v3. I made sure I started the situation off as a 1v1, which is very important because it means I can stack my passive on this Aatrox or no one else is hitting me. And then by the time they come to back him up, I've already got 4 stacks on before I've taken a single point of damage. And now that I get my 5 stacks, even though now the situation doesn't look so good, right? It's a 2v4 essentially, my mid's not even joining us. It's still fine because I've managed to stack my passive. I'm the strongest champ in the game at this point, and I'm able to get a ton of damage down to their whole team, and I was actually able to live it in this situation. Where of course, even if I died there, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, it wouldn't be great. But the point is, I started this skirmish, this 1v3, this 2v4, whatever you want to call it, I started off as a 1v1. Which is really important because a lot of people see Darius as this big 1v2, 1v3 king, which is only true in the sense where if he starts off the fight as a 1v1 and he can get enough stacks down before other people can join the fight, he of course is going to have a very, very good chance of being able to execute and take them all down. Up next, we're going to be covering the laning phase, and I've broken it down into 3 main categories. The first one being Darius prefers all-ins over short trades. Of course, he does have some combos that we'll cover later that will help him in short trade situations, but for the most part, he prefers all-in situations where both parties are high HP, because Darius actually doesn't do well at being low HP versus low HP, especially versus champs that take Ignite. So here's just one of those examples where I'm versus Ignite Riven. If I were to have poked him down now with my W, tank a few of his Qs, we're both going to be half HP. That is not a situation that favors me. If I ever get ganked, of course I'm instantly dead, but even in the 1v1, his champion is better than me at all-ins when we're both low HP, especially because he has Ignite. But here I notice he uses his Qs on the wave, and by now I haven't taken any small trades with him. We are both full HP, so I instantly all in him, because he wasted one of his key abilities in front of me, and now I'm not low enough that he can turn onto me with Ignite, even when his Qs come back up, and I run him down. And as you notice, I didn't start with my E. I didn't E early until I absolutely needed to. As long as you're auto-attacking them as Darius, you don't really need to use your E until it's the final moment, until they're just about to get away and you pull them back in. But for the most part, E is a spell that you want to be holding, especially in these melee matchups. But the main point I want to be teaching you is you don't really need to be taking these short trades against champions like Riven, champions like Jax, Renekton, where they tick Ignite, because it's not going to favor you in the end. Next, I'm going to be covering the second main point of Darius laning, and that is playing for the bounce back. And in this situation, I'm versing Aatrox, where of course his champion is very strong at level 5, level 7, where he can start to poke me down, but as a level 1 champion, he is so much weaker than me, so I'm guaranteed to get push. However, if I were to just keep him push under tower, which is a mistake I see a lot of bad Dariuses do, where they just tunnel on pushing the wave under the tower and trying to poke their opponent, it doesn't really work, because Darius has very bad poke under tower, and Darius has very bad ability to dive them under tower, because you need time to stack your passive before you can get your full damage down, and while you're tanking a tower, you don't really have that time. So in this situation, me knowing that, I'm just looking to keep this Darius under tower, or push a big wave, keep him there, and then let the wave come back towards me and look to all in him once it's near my tower, so I have a long enough lane to basically abuse the fact that my champion can run him down. So here, I push a wave under tower, and I run straight into the enemy jungle, where here I want to be looking to punish their jungle, something we'll cover later on, but in this situation, their jungle doesn't actually show. So it's fine, I go back to lane, and the wave is still coming back towards me, where in this case, if I was lower HP, if I was half HP, for example, or no mana, I would have just based, bought a longsword, and come back, ready to brawl this Trox. But here, I'm just looking to let the wave come back into me, and get some poke down if I can, like in that situation, but I really want to be avoiding these tiny trades with him, if I can help it. But in that case, there was a free one, so I took it, and now I'm just looking for the time where my wave is outside my tower and I have time to run him down. Especially in this case where we both burnt our flash early game, but now my ghost is coming up before his flash, which is a very important timer for you to learn as Darius. The time difference between Ghost and Flash, not a lot of people respect that. But here, now, the wave's exactly where I want it to be, so I know I want to be looking to all in him. So here I'm posturing in that way, I'm posturing aggressively, I want to be looking to start the fight onto him, and here, even though he gets level 5, I Ghost onto him straight away, and I'm holding onto my E. Where even though he's level 5, my champion is just so much stronger, it doesn't matter. Where if he had Ignite, of course I wouldn't have been able to do that, which is why I recommend taking Ignite versus Darius. But for the most part, the concept I want you to learn is don't just keep your lane opponent stuck under tower. Don't just keep pushing waves into him and letting him farm for free when you're playing this powerful laning champion. Make the wave come back towards you and then abuse the fact that you have the long lane with your ghost and run them down. And now we're going to be covering the final concept, which is use your strength to shut down the enemy jungler. And here in this game, it's the same one before where I killed the Cassante level 2, and I know that even if I let this wave bounce back into me and I look to punish and kill this Cassante, it's not really going to be my highest chance of winning, popping Ghost and killing this guy, because he's always going to be this tanky frontline meatball for his team, no matter how far behind he gets. So instead, it's better for me to use my strength to attack the enemy jungle, because like we talked about before, Darius is one of the best champs in the game at 1v2ing, but you need to be starting the fight off as a 1v1. But if you crash a big wave under your lane opponent's tower and he's farming it, and you run at the jungler, all of a sudden you've got that 1v1 you want until the lane opponent comes late, and then by the time he arrives, you've either already killed his jungle or you've gotten 5 stacks onto him, and the fight's going to be very favorable for you. So in this situation, I run at the enemy jungle, award it because he's not there, and now I'm just looking to attack him at the timer that he goes for his Gromp or his blue. But I'm pretty sure he was fighting down bot side in this game, so there's no need for me to go now, and I'm just looking to keep the wave here for now, but hard push it and run at the jungle when the timer comes, where Belvet's going to be wanting to farm those camps. So here I'm just looking to do just that. And I'm not just looking to AFK push the wave in, right? I'm looking to poke this Cassante down at the same time, trade with him. But I really do want to be pressuring this Belvet. So here, the second I see him go for his Gromp, I run straight at his top camps. Where it's not ideal because I didn't crash a big wave, but this fight is still going to start off as a 1v1 before Cassante gets here. But luckily my Singe saw the play as well, he managed to pull up as well, and it works even better because he was a part of it, my Singe mid, good man. But even if he wasn't there, I still would have gone for this play regardless, and it would have been favourable for me. Of course, him being there made it a lot better, but you'll find your mid laner might pull up, your jungler might pull up and make it easier for you, but for the most part, even if they don't, you're probably going to win these situations. However, you do need to play to what's happening. Of course, if you're 0-2 and the enemy jungler is 5-0, you probably can't just pull up onto him, but for the most part, objectively, if the game is not fully out of control, you're probably going to be able to beat the jungler, and then if your top laner comes late, you're going to be able to beat him as well. And for my final example, I really wanted to showcase another variable they need to be keeping in mind when you look for these invades, and that is the strength of the enemy mid laner. Now in this game, I'm not even that strong. I'm 1 and 2, I've been camped a bit by this Lee, but I still want to be attacking him on his blue, because even if Rumble comes late, I'm going to win. And the important variable I keep in mind is they have a Kassadin mid. So even though in this situation my Fizz is basing, I'm not too worried about a Kassadin pulling up early game. He's not going to do much to me, so I attack this Lee Sim. And look, I'm just wasting all of their time, and even though I'm not able to kill their Lee on this buff, I'm wasting Rumble, I'm wasting Kassadin's time, they're all getting chunked, and eventually my team is able to join me in this fight, and we're actually able to win this skirmish. Where if they had a very strong mid lane champion, say they had a champ like Renekton mid or Pantheon for example, just off the top of my head, then of course I would have been instantly killed in that situation. And it really depends on what you're versing, but a lot of mid lane champs are quite weak early game, so it won't matter, but it's still something you really need to be keeping in mind. Up next, we're going to be covering abilities and combos, and we'll start with Darius's Q, which is the ability that you max, and you can actually Q flash on the spell. You don't have to flash and then Q. So here, for example, I can Q flash and hit these dummies, but something you need to keep in mind, and a big mistake I see Darius's make, you don't want to be flashing too early. Where here, for example, if I Q flash, they have such a big timer to dodge this ability, whether that be dashing away, flashing, parrying it, whatever they want to do, but if I had to time it perfectly, there's no chance they can actually react to it. So I'll try to showcase it here, where if I flash at the last possible tick, there is no way they can dodge it, and the only way they'll be able to get away from it is to predict what I'm going to be doing, but in lower elo brackets that's not going to happen, so if you time your Q flash perfectly, there's no chance they can react to it. Another thing you can do with the Q is you can actually Q and then restart your recoil animation, which can be quite useful when you're clearing a wave and trying to base right after. So I'll showcase it here, I can QB, and it doesn't really cancel my Q animation, but it's important to get the outer ring of your Q, of course, the higher damage, but for the most part it's going to speed up your recoil by half a second or so. Another tip is a good way to start an all-in against an immobile lane opponent is to start off your combo by hitting Q and Ghost at the same time and closing the gap between you. So I'll showcase an example here, where I pop Q and Ghost at the same time and it allows me to close that gap and hit the outer ring of my Q. Now I can start my combo off by already hitting a Q on him, already doing the damage, already having a bleed stack, and by the time I have 5 bleed stacks, there's a good chance my Q is going to be coming back off cooldown soon, and now I can use that with the AD steroid that my passive is going to be giving me. The next tip is you can actually use your stride breaker during your Q animation. So I'll showcase it here, Q stride, and you can also do that with Iron Spike Whip, Gore Drinker, but it's especially good with stride breaker because it's going to slow their move speed and allow you to hit the outer part of your Q more easily. Moving on to Darius's W, and the most important thing about this spell is it's actually an auto attack reset. So I'll showcase it here, we can auto W. This allows you to get 2 bleed stacks down very quickly, and it's one of the most important combos you need to know on this champion. The next point about Darius's W is it actually gives you extra attack range, which can be very useful for punishing people that go for CS, or even when you're chasing people down. And the final point about Darius's W, and I'll throw up an example, is that you can actually use this to buffer through crowd control, where if you're just about to be stunned or knocked up even, you can actually get your W off if you buffer it and time it correctly, where even though you're knocked up or stunned, you're still swinging your axe and getting that damage down, and this can be especially important in lane, especially in matchups such as Jax. Moving on to Darius is that you can actually use this ability to cancel a lot of spells. Jax, Q, Renekton, Zaki, it can be very good at cancelling dashes, and it's something I recommend you practicing because if you're able to cancel someone's main gap closer, whether they're going towards you or away, you're going to have a much higher chance of winning that all-in overall. And another point about Darius is that every time you put a point in it, not only does the cooldown go down, but the armor pin goes up as well, which is a huge reason why Darius maxes the spell second, but the armor pin actually works on towers. So I'll showcase an example here, where every auto I do does 83 damage, but now if I put 5 points in E, I'm going to start to do 87 damage, which is I'm pretty sure it's a bug that the armor pin works on towers, but it's a bug that we can abuse regardless. Moving on to Darius's ulti, and this spell is actually a bit of a mini gap closer, which can be very useful when chasing down opponents, especially range champs, and it can really help you close the gap. And another bit of advice for your ulti is there will be a lot of situations where it's actually good to ult your lane opponent when they're on 4 stacks. Now I see a lot of people tunnel on trying to get the 5 stack juicy dunk damage, but there are so many situations where ulting them on 4, having your passive pop straight away, having them bleeding out, and having the extra AD from your passive for your next W and Q can actually be better overall. Now as for Darius's bleed, there is a good way to abuse this passive versus champions with bone plating, where if you hit them just before the bone plating comes up, now once their bone plating arrives, the bleed is already going to pop it, it's going to waste the bone plating completely, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you to all in them in the future. Up next we have combos, and I'll start with the most important combo of all, Darius's main trading combo. So I'll showcase it here, where you want to be using auto WQ, where you can cancel your auto animation with the W and your W animation with the Q if you do it smooth enough. So I'll showcase it here, auto WQ, and you get 3 bleed stacks down very quickly, and it's a very high damage combo overall. Now one of his most important combos is Darius can actually EQ extremely quickly, fast enough that they can't actually flash or parry or do anything to dodge it. So I'll showcase it here, where if I EQ this guy fast enough, and he flashes as fast as he can, he's still going to get hit by my Q, even though he's been mashing his flash cooldown as hard as he can, and it's going to be the same case for his parry, where I'm going to be doing it in 15 seconds when my E is back up, of course, but even if he spams parry as hard as he can, there's nothing he can do to block my incoming Q damage, which is very, very effective against all champions that have dashes to escape your Q, or champions that are going to be flashing out of it. You can essentially make it so they can never dodge your Q. So I'll showcase it here, I'll emote to let him know it's coming, and now even if he spams parry, there's just no way he can block my Q at all. So it's quite an important combo to have, and I definitely recommend practicing this before you play Darius in solo queue. And the next level to this combo, and Dragoon actually sent me an example, where you can EWQ fast enough that they're unable to flash it. However, this combo is quite difficult to do in a real game, and I strongly recommend you practicing it in practice tool before you give it a go. Next, we have the Q flash W, where you're trying to cancel the Q animation with your W, and it looks like this, Q flash W. Our next combo is quite an important one where you can cancel your W animation with your ulti, so I'll showcase it here, WR, and the reason this one is so important is because this is the main way you're going to be killing the backline in a late game team fight, where let's say for example you're stacked 5 times off the front line or even gotten a reset and the AD carry is shooting you down, the best way to kill him is to flash WR, and even if he flashes away the damage is still going to follow him. So I'll showcase it here, flash WR, and even if this training dummy flashed away, he would still get executed into the next life. And with their combo, if there's no way they're going to flash away, you can use AAWR, so it looks sort of something like this, where you're cancelling both the animations quite smoothly. And in lane, if you're trying to chase someone down and you have to lead the combo with your E, the best combo you can be doing is EWQ, where you can cancel the W animation with your Q. It looks sort of something like this, EWQ, and then you start chasing them down. And you can do the same thing with EWR, where if you want to be executing your opponent at their low HP, then you don't really have to be wasting time with your Q. Now as for the 5-stack combos, there's no way to get a 5-stack combo extremely quickly without using your ulti, but the main one, the fastest one you can do is by starting with auto WQ, E auto, and then one more auto into ult. As you saw, we had to wait a little bit for that 5th auto, but if I were to have just ultied straight away to get the 5th stack, that would have been quite a fast 5-stack combo overall. And if you are willing to use your ulti for it, it'll look a little something like this, where you auto WQ, E auto R. And it's a lot faster overall, however you are missing out on the extra execute damage, so it really depends what situation you're going for when you pick and choose which combo to use. Up next, we're going to be covering matchups, and in general, the champions Darius struggles with the most are ranged champions that can poke him down without taking any damage in return. So champions like Kennen, champs like Vayne, Heimerdinger, of course they can chip down your HP bar and there's no way you can really get onto them, they have such good disengaged tools. Or champions that can trade onto you and look to all-in you later with Ignite. So champions like Renekton, champs like Jax, they can walk towards you, force a trade and then jump away, and eventually when you're both low HP, they have the all-in threat with their Ignite that they can burst you down before you can get your 5 stacks off. However, those champions are more skill matchups than anything else is pretty Darius favored, so for the most part, you're going to be fine, but I do have some advice for all matchups in general, but especially the hard ones. Starting with the hard matchups, champions like Vayne and Quinn, they can be very hard in lane, however there is a good way to beat them, and that is play with the bushes, and if you can ever get onto them, if you can ever get a hook, walk behind them, because both these champions, their disengage is pushing you away, but if you get behind them, they're pushing you back towards their tower, and especially if you have ghost popped, you can now very easily stick onto them and cut off their escape back to their tower, and you're going to have a good chance of being able to all-in them. However, especially against Vayne, she's eventually just going to outscale and kill you in 3 or 6 shots, and that is going to be a bit of a problem, but the lane itself, although it is horrible, there are ways around it, especially if you play for bushes and you play for getting behind them if you get the opportunity. And as for Heimerdinger, I would say this is a pure neutralizer lane where you can't really hard punish him, and although he can poke you down a little bit, he can't really kill you, but if you run towards him, of course, when he's level 6, he's just going to gun you down with his towers, but the way you can beat him is by punishing him early game. Your level 1 is a lot stronger, especially if you can get behind him, so if you use that opportunity to chase him down before he has his towers placed, or if he puts his towers in the wrong spot and you're able to clear them with your Q, you're going to have a good chance to punish him early game and get a kill, and then once you're snowballed, the lane's going to be a lot easier overall, but if he's very good, places his tower down, respects your level 1, then of course this lane is just going to be a neutralizer. And as for Kennen, this matchup can be quite difficult, but if you get early Merc Treads, have Doran Shield second win, you should be able to at least go down 10-15 CS, it's not going to be too bad, and if he ever makes a mistake with his E, especially if you're able to hook him in while he is using E and get your W off, his E is going to be wasted, because your W is a 90% slow, even though his E gives him a lot of movement speed, it's not really going to do much to a 90% slow. So once you get onto him, if you're able to hook him before he is away from you, then you're actually going to be able to chase him down and beat him. Now, as for the opponent side of matchups, I'd recommend not taking any short trades against these champions and playing for an all-in, especially once you just get back to lane with fresh resources. However, if you do need to trade against them, using the EQ trade and walking away from them is your best bet, or even EWQ if you're feeling confident, but for the most part, these champs are going to be chipping away at your HP bar and removing your ability to all-in them, so if you're able to all-in them before that point, you're going to have a much higher success rate overall, especially if you can get plated steel caps in a lot of these AD matchups. Moving down to the skill matchups. Now, in my opinion, the best way for you to improve upon these is to have a clear game plan in mind before you play these matchups and see what actually happens. Compare it to the VOD and make small adjustments and get better and better at your knowledge on these matchups overall. Because all of these matchups, in theory, you should be able to win them or they should be able to win them depending on who plays it best. So I'll use the Jax matchup as an example, one of the hardest skill matchups where he can actually trade onto you with E and W and then Q away before you get an all-in opportunity. And now once you're both low, he can all-in you with his Ignite and actually beat you before you get your 5 stacks down. However, if you all-in him before that point, or if you play the trades well, if you're able to space out his E by using your E on him, stepping back and then re-engaging, or even better, if you're more comfortable, if he pops his stun onto you and you buffer your W through the stun, hit your 90% slow, hit your damage and chase him down, then you're going to be able to win that matchup. And all of these matchups have small intricacies like that you're going to learn and improve upon, but I recommend having a clear game plan in mind, taking notes and improving your knowledge overall, or you're going to find yourself losing them. And then even if you're really good at the champion, you should still be doing that, because if you have a clear game plan in mind, oh, I see I'm against Aatrox, I know exactly what I'm going to do, you're going to feel a lot better in your games overall. Moving down to the Darius favored matchups, these are the matchups where you win all-ins pretty handily, and they don't really have the ability to short trade onto you that well. And you should be looking to punish these champions pre-6 most of the time. So for example, a champ like Alawi, where her ulti can be quite strong, but you can easily get pushed level 1, bounce away back into you and all-in her level 3, level 4. There's not really much you can do in this lane without calling her jungler, crying for help, and then you're carrying the game in a different way. And a lot of these matchups where windows like that, champs like Ornn, champs like Shen, if you bounce away back, it's going to be very, very easy for you to punish them, which is why it's a Darius favored matchup. And finishing off with the free matchups, these are the lanes where you're going to be either blowing up their tower with Demolish, so champs like Maokai, champs like Sion, very, very easy to do so, or champs where you can bounce away back and kill them very easily, and even if their jungler comes, there's a good chance you can 1v2. Let's say they have a champion like Cho'Gath and Lee Sin jungle, they're not really going to be able to kill you if you're high HP, and it's very, very hard for these champions to win lane against you, so for the most part, you should be winning them. Up next, we're going to be covering the mid game, and in this example, I've played up against a Malphite, and of course I did win the matchup. It's quite an easy Darius matchup. However, I'm not super far ahead. I'm 2-2. I did die to a couple ganks, but the main point is I'm able to get push in my side lane, which is extremely important on Darius because you're never really going to take TP. So if you verse someone that gets pushed against you, you're really going to struggle to have an impact in the game because they can keep you stuck under the tower with their push, and now you can't really teamfight, you can't win the side. There's not a lot of options for you to do to be a part of the game unless your lane opponent makes a mistake, which is okay because Darius is so strong early game. You should be able to get pushed in the side lane most of the time early on, especially in the mid game, and it's only until you start to verse late game Fioras that it can be a bit more problematic. Now here, after I broke my tower, the first thing I did was run straight bot, because this is the lane opposite of the next objective, which is Herald. A lot of people make the mistake of running mid and trying to be a part of the fight, but if I did that, then Malphite would be here as well, and even though in this exact game I am stronger than Malphite, that's still all he can really do, engage on my team with his ulti, and look to one-shot someone before the fight breaks out. That's his only win condition. But if I head straight back to side, I can look to dominate him and keep him stuck here, which is what happens. He tries to leave his tower, he gets chunked and loses his ulti, and now I've kept him trapped here. He can no longer participate in this game, he can't do anything to my team, and especially because he used ulti, I'm no longer scared of being ganked. But even if he didn't use ulti, even if he played better and respected, I would still be here trying to draw pressure, because if the Graves comes to gank me or the mid laner comes, that means my team is going to be getting Herald for free due to my pressure. However, now that Herald is gone, I do have to play a little bit more safe, which is why you see me think about basing. However, Malphite has no ulti, so I'm just going to be looking to play aggressive regardless, because even if Graves comes, I'm just going to 1v2 them. There's no CC to lock me down. It's very easy for me to get my stacks off. And that's exactly what I do. I look to break down this tower, and then I'm going to be able to reset and play the same sequence all over again. I'm going to be looking to go to the opposite side of the next objective and keep this Malphite stuck, because his only way back into this game is by engaging onto my team and starting a team fight. But if I keep him trapped under the tier 2, if he ever thinks about doing that, if he ever TPs into a fight, then of course I'm just going to break the tower and eventually get the inhib. And here they send a lot of people to deal with me, and probably Talia as well. She's trying to eat their camps, but I'm able to get out and I reset as fast as I can and look to start the sequence all over again. So now for this next sequence, my thought process coming onto the map is that Baron is going to be spawning in 2 minutes, so before he gets to that point, I want Malphite to be stuck under the bot tier 2, unable to play the game. Because even if he goes right now, after my base timer and engages onto my team, it doesn't really matter. Although I did ping it because I didn't really want him to kill my teammates, but for the most part it wouldn't matter if he killed them because I wouldn't be able to get Baron. But if I were to have done this 2 minutes later, if I delayed my base for some reason, and he did it at 20, now all of a sudden the 0-2 Malphite just gets 1 engage off, his team gets Baron, and he's allowed to win the game. So I need to make sure before 20 minutes that he is stuck under this tower, unable to play, and then if he stays under the tower, I'm going to be fogging between the lanes and looking to punish his team if they try to overextend mid, which will let my team get a lot of control over Baron, which I like to call the pin and fog. You pin the Malphite under tower and you fog between the lanes. However, in this situation, they instantly ganked me, which is my own fault. I ran up with Herald and Hullbreaker Demolish trying to get greedy for the tower. However, it gives an opportunity where, because I'm so strong, I almost actually win this, but I couldn't get my ulti off due to the center route. But now I notice Malphite used ulti on me, and a lot of them are chunked. They have to base. So my first thought process now is I've got two options. If I run back bot, look to repeat the process all over again, then of course there may be a situation where you can get Baron, or I can look to really abuse the fact that what they just wasted on me to kill me right now. Where Malphite uses ulti, they got chunked, they have to base. So if I were to have run straight to Baron out of base, and I'll skip forward a little bit, that's exactly what I do, I'm just hard calling this. We can get Baron, Malphite no ulti, there's no way they can fight this. Graves is based as well, he has to come out of base, and my team reluctantly, but eventually they start it, and now we're able to get Baron for free, because they sent a whole bunch of people to me bot side, which means my team could get full topside control. Look how much vision we have topside. We had a bit more, I think they cleared it. But for the most part, they sent so many people to me, my team was able to control topside, and they wasted so many resources, we were able to essentially get Baron for free. And it is solo queue, my AD carry tried to make it Uzi montage, and he almost got us killed, but for the most part, this is what's going to be winning you games. Pinning and fogging in the side, making your lane opponent unable to play the game, where your fog is making the enemy team respect you, and if they don't, you start a 5v4 fight, and eventually you're going to be able to use that pressure to secure Baron for your team. Up next, we're going to be covering teamfighting, and the most important thing you need to keep in mind when teamfighting on Darius is that you're one of the best front-to-back champions in the game, where a lot of people make the mistake where they've been playing a bit of Renekton, a bit of Jax, they feel they need to dive onto the backline, and in some cases that may be true. You can get a super player, flash 3-man EQ, or look for a good flank, but for the most part, you'll be playing front-to-back with your carries, and the reason for that is when someone dives onto you, and let's be honest, in solo queue, someone always will, their Nautilus, their Leona, even their tank top, someone is going to make a big mistake and dive onto your team, you're going to be able to either get a reset off them by your team killing them and you finishing with ulti, or get 5 stacks onto them, and now that you've got your passive stacked, you can really start to pop your ghost, pop your flash, and dominate the team fight. And here I have an example from XCM, and he is a 2000 LP Darius main in China, where he's extremely good at the champion, of course, and here is a situation where he's team fighting with his Callista. The Nautilus goes in, like all Nautiluses do, and he's not trying to dive the backline, he's just stacking on him, and even now he's not chasing the Akshan, he's not chasing the Draven, he's just killing the opponents one at a time, whoever is in front of him. He is playing the front to back exactly as it's described and just killing whoever he can, whoever's in front, and as soon as he gets those 5 stacks, the first reset off his first opponent, then it's very easy for him to one-shot everyone else that's in his path. Next I have an example from a recent solo queue game where front to backing is actually not best in this situation, where the enemy team is diving past my tower and I have a free Hexgate behind them. Of course, in this situation, flanking is going to turn out really good. My main point is, your default should be front to backing, because Darius doesn't really like running at people from the back, from the side. He likes to be diving from the front, and even if he's not diving, he really likes playing verse dive comps the most, first champions that are running towards you so you can get a free stack, 3-5 stacks of 3 dunk, and then you look to punch the backline after you've already dealt with the front line. Up next, we're going to be covering Darius' identity and the mindset you should be having while playing this champion. The first point being, you are extremely powerful level 1 and early game, you should be looking to gain an early game advantage, whether that be through stomping your lane, denying XP or gold, getting tower plates, killing your lane opponent, or punishing the enemy jungler. You should be looking to have a high impact in the game early game. At the very least, you need to be securing Herald for your team, because you're going to be very powerful in those 2v2, 3v3 Herald fights, where you can be the difference maker between your team getting it or not if you play for it. If you ward it ahead of time, if you push your lane opponent under tower and look to fog towards the river, you can be the reason your team gets Herald, and you can use that to break open the early game. And some advice I have about how to improve upon your early game is be willing to make proactive mistakes. Don't just look at the VOD where you played poorly and think, oh, I'll do that better next time. Go into the game thinking, okay, when this guy mispositions, I'm going to punish him, or when this guy uses a spell, when Riven wastes E, I'm going to ghost him down, and really learn the limitations of your champion. Learn what works and what doesn't, and see the limits, because I see a lot of people make that mistake, where they have someone overextended versus him as Darius, but they just don't see the window to ghost them down and punish, and they're just letting their lane opponent get XP and gold for free, where they otherwise could be hard start punishing them and abusing this champion's early game strength. And for the next couple points, we did cover them already a little bit in the level 1 and laning section, but it's really good to reiterate. You don't really look to punish your lane opponent under tower. You suck at poking under tower, you suck at diving, look to pull them away from the tower and all in them, or look to punish their jungler instead by running into the enemy jungle using your priority well. And another very important point about Darius' identity is that he is very summoner spell reliant, to the point where you almost don't want to be fighting without them. If your team is trying to force a second or a third dragon fight, and your Ghost and Flash is off cooldown and you haven't pushed out your side yet, then you should be backpinging them off and looking to fight at another time. And of course sometimes it's unavoidable, sometimes you will have to pull up to a Dragon Soul, an Outer Fight or a Baron, and just be there, but for the most part you should be trying to dictate when to fight around your summoners, because your champion's power is so much higher when you have either one of them up or even both of them up. And the next point about Darius' identity, and something a lot of people underrate, is that Darius actually scales extremely well. If you rock up to a teamfight early game with just your Triforce, you're probably going to get one shot before you can get your full damage down if they're playing a disciplined teamfight. However, later on in the game, once you have your tanky stats, you got some MR, you got some armor, you're really going to be able to survive it long enough to get your 5 stacks down, or at the very least dunk someone, and that's when you really start to take over a teamfight. And something unique about Darius is that his scaling is pretty high backloaded, in the sense where if you check out his passive, it actually does 5 extra damage every level, but once you hit level 13, every level after that is an extra 25 damage, which is just insane. So as from level 13 onwards, you're just doing more and more damage as you scale into the game, and especially level 16 with the extra second ulti, you just become a monster, especially in a front to back setting, where you can just one-shot squishes or tank a light. You don't really discriminate, and once you've got one guy killed or 5 stacks onto him, you can look to take over this team fight by flashing onto the backline. Up next, we'll be covering drafting, so that once you've added Darius to your champion pool, you know the best situations and the worst situations where you'd want to be picking it. So to start it off, the ban I recommend when blind picking Darius is actually Vayne, because Vayne top has become super popular in solo queue recently, and I recommend not playing that matchup, especially if you're beginning, and then even if you get comfortable with the matchup, it's going to be very hard later on in the game. But then if you're fine with it, of course you can ban whatever you want, that's just a preference, but for the most part that's the ban that's hardest for your lane 1v1. And then as for jungle, the champs you want to be seeing on your team are champs that can go in before you, so you just want to be playing with meatballs essentially. So champs like Hecarim are good, champs like Xin Zhao, doesn't matter, you just want champions that can tank damage and spells for you. Because even though you are a beefy frontline champ, you need time to get your usefulness down. You need time to get a stack off, a 5 stack, you need time to get a dunk off, and having other frontliners with you is going to make that very, very easy. So champions like Xin, champions like Lee Sin, Hecarim, champs that'll just go in, tank their CC, tank their damage, is going to be very nice for you. And then as for mid lane, I'd say the same thing. You like playing with dive champions, champs like Akali, champs like Yone is very good. But to be honest, you're also pretty good with control mages because you can play front to back with them. But I always recommend playing Darius with a full dive comp if you can, because it's just so much easier. Because if they have to think about Akali, Darius stacks, Hecarim, all these very strong dive champions, it's going to be very hard for them to mark you and keep you from doing what you want to be doing. And then for AD carry, of course, dive champion is going to be best, right? Kai'Sa, Kalista, Tristana, all very good. You don't really want to be playing Darius with a low damage backline like Jhin. You're playing front to back with him and he's doing nothing. It's not really useful for you. So champs like Kai'Sa and Xayah and Tristana are going to be very, very good. And then as for support, you definitely want to be playing Darius with an engaged support. So champs like Nautilus, champs like Leona, champs like Rel, they're just going to go in before you, tank their damage, tank their CC, and just make it very easy for you to do your job. Now, as for the champs you don't want to be seeing on your team for jungle, it's of course going to be some range champion like Graves. Kindred is okay because you can actually stack your ulti, you stack your passive, sorry, and its ulti. But Graves is just completely useless with Darius. I hate playing Darius when my jungler picks Graves. Champs like that, just AD range champions in general feel very bad with Darius. And as for mid, you don't really want to be playing with the same thing. Champs like Akshan, champs like Lucian mid back when it was popular. Even Jace. Jace is more okay, but you don't want to be playing with AD range champions in general for mid and jungle. And then as for AD, you don't really want to be playing with, like I talked about before, low damage backline champs like Jhin. They're not going to be diving in with you. They're not really going to be helping you facilitate damage by killing the guy in the front. Because the reason you want them to do damage is that so they can get them low enough for you to dunk them. But Jhin doesn't really do damage, to be honest. He's more utility and poke. So having a Jhin and playing front to back with him, he's not really going to help you get your damage off. And then as for support, you don't really want to be playing with enchanters. Now some enchanters are okay, movement speed boosting ones like Yuumi feels okay, but champions like Sona doesn't feel that good, champs like Soraka, it's not horrible to be honest, but you really want to have meatballs in front of you. So look in this comp here, no one is going to be tanking damage for me on my team, so I'll probably have to do the Gore Drinker build and I have to play more of a frontline role, and it's going to be very hard for me to get my 5 stacks down and hard for me to get a dunk off and do what I want to be doing in this fight. Moving on to the enemy team, the champs you do want to be seeing are champions that is very easy for you to stack against and champions that don't do a ton of damage. So for example, a champion like Sion, when he ults into your team, it's very easy for you to get your 5 stacks down onto this champion. And same for jungle, a champ like Sejuani, a champ like a Mumu, when they go in and blow their CC, even especially if you've got Merc Treads, Tenacity, Unflinching, all that stuff, it's going to be very easy for you to do what you want to be doing. Because they don't really have enough damage to deal with you, and even though they have CC, it's still going to be easy for you to get your stacks down on these meatballs because they're low damage meatballs. And as for mid, it's similar, you want to be versing low range champions that go into you, so a champion like Kiana is good, Silas is probably the best, where even though he's AP damage, and a melee, it's still very easy for you, right? You don't really need to stack much MR against his champ, because he's not going to blow all his spells on you, he's probably going to blow it on a squishier member, and even if he does on you, he can't really one-shot you before you can get your 5 stacks down. It's just very easy for you to verse these low-range melee dive comps as Darius, and for ADC, it's pretty similar, low-range champions. Ideally, you'd be versing a low-damage one like Jhin, but versus a champ like Samira, you're going to have a very good time. This low-range champion is very easy for you to get onto her, and as for support, it's the same. A champion that's going to be diving into you, Nautilus is the best in my opinion, he's just the freest kill once he hooks in, and a champ like Leona, although it's quite free as well, she just seems a bit more tankier than Naut overall. So these squishy champions that want to be diving into you are very, very easy for you to get a free dunk off, because versus Sion, you probably have to get your 5 passive stacks down, but versus Nautilus, he's probably going to get one shot with your ulti, and now that you've got your reset, you're really going to dominate these fights. And as for the champs you don't want to be versing, it's going to be ranged champions or champions that can kite you very easily. So I'll show you some examples where for top lane, you don't really want to be versing a champ like Kennen or Na later on in the game. It's very easy for them to keep their distance and CC you if you walk towards them. And for jungle, range champs as well, like Graves can be a bit of a problem, but he's pretty short range, not the biggest deal. But champs like Kha'Zix, right? Now you might be thinking he's melee, it's not too bad, but he's invisible, can't stack on him, he can jump away. If he evolves his W as well, the slowing spikes, it's very hard for you to do your job against champs like that. And he does a ton of damage if you're getting CC'd by someone else on his team. And as for mid, you don't want to be versing a long range champions that do a ton of consistent damage. So champs like Azir can be quite powerful, champs like Victor later on in the game can be hard. And as for ADC, you really don't want to be versing champs like Vayne, of course, just too much true damage. Champs like Kog'Maw can be really difficult, and once they're paired with enchanters as well, let's say Cog Lulu, you know, a famous combo, Cog Janna, it doesn't matter, but a combo like that, even Cog Braum has a ton of CC. It's going to be very hard for you to ever get a reset or ever get a stack against a comp like this. Up next, I'm going to be doing a full game review and talking you through my thought process throughout this entire game. Where here, I've applied the level 1 concept, get behind your lane opponent level 1, and I do that by taking over the 3rd lane bush on red side, and this Renekton just doesn't respect. Of course he should have walked back to his tower, but regardless I would have gotten such a good trade-off on him from getting behind him when he walked up to the wave, but he made the big mistake. He tried to kite it out and tried to fight me in the wave, but of course my champion is just so much stronger than him, especially because I started out the fight by already being behind him and getting a couple stacks down with my auto W. And now that I've gotten the kill, I know he's probably going to TP back to lane, so I need to be slow pushing this wave and getting a base off, because I don't want to be stuck in this lane. Your champion does not have TP, so you can't afford to be stuck in a lane where you have no way to base and come back. But fortunately, I'm strong enough to fight him level 2 versus 1 if he went onto me, and the jungler is going to be taking a while to come up. He has to clear up, and if I can get this 3rd wave in, then I can essentially get a base off for free, and then spend the money I got from the first blood. Where now I'm just hard pushing as fast as I can, but I don't want to be too disrespectful. I don't want to blow all my cooldowns in front of his face and not space him. I still need to be wary, and here I'm level 3 to 2, so I play a bit more aggressive, but I just need to be getting this wave in. And here, my jungler does something amazing where he basically staunches the enemy jungler away from me and lets me get my wave in, and Renekton doesn't play accordingly, where I'm able to easily kill him. And there, I didn't flash onto him, I knew my bleed damage would kill him, so I didn't need to waste that resource, and now I'm going to get a free base and spend the money from these 2 kills, where this game you might think is going to be a bit of a meme because I got a couple kills early on, but the mid-game macro was a very good example. I still wanted to show it, and the level 1 was a very good example as well. So in general, this was a good example, even though my lane opponent may be making a lot of mistakes. So now from this point coming back on the map, of course I'm very strong, I have flash advantage over this Renekton, and I just bought plated steel caps. Of course I would, they have a Renekton Graves top jungle, this item will make me basically invincible as long as I don't make any major mistake. Which of course I do, this is a good example of what not to do, where the wave is coming back towards me. This Renekton is basically a free kill once it's in the right position, or a free pressure, he has to call his jungler to help him. If his jungler doesn't come when the wave's coming towards me, eventually I'm going to either kill this Renekton, or just zone him from XP the entire game. So I should be very, very aware of that, and even though I assumed I could 1v2 it even if I played disrespectfully, which is not the case. I can 1v2 their top jungle, but I have to play it well. And here I'm not. I'm taking these short trades versus Renekton, which of course we talked about, you only want long trades, where this one's more okay on level 5 to 4, but for the most part I only want to be taking extended all-ins against him, when the wave is in a better position. And here I'm just playing way too disrespectfully for no reason. I'm running at him between the wave, when the wave's about to be in a good position, and I get ganked. I was asking to get killed, and I did, which I deserved, but if I were to just held my wave outside the tower, zone this Renekton, but zone him respectfully, not zone him all the way by his tower, I could have made their Graves come in, pushed the wave, staunched them, and wasted his time, which would allow my team to get this dragon for free, instead of getting it in response for me dying. And that topic we just talked about is something I want you guys to become very comfortable with when you're playing this champion. Wasting the enemy jungler's time is a big way you can impact the game early on this champ, where in some cases you'll be able to 1v2 them of course, but when you can't, it's okay for them to come to your lane to push the wave in and waste their time. Of course, ideally a jungler would be there to take the 2v2, but we all know junglers don't do the ideal thing for us, so we really just need to play accordingly and be willing to just waste the enemy jungler's time and take that as a small win. So here anyway, I come back to lane and the wave is bouncing back towards him, so I need to have two plans in mind. I either need to be pushing him under tower and attacking the enemy jungler, or letting the wave bounce back towards me and looking to run him down. However, another variable that comes to mind when looking at this sequence is Herald is going to be spawning pretty soon, so you don't really want to be playing for the bounce back and the freeze on the Herald timer, because he can just ignore your freeze, give up a few XP, give up 6, 8 CS, whatever he wants to do, and look to just run at the Herald with his jungler, which is not something I want to be giving him when I'm a strong Darius. And here my Echo wants to die, but I call it off because level 6 Renekton, there's no way. But here I don't want to be letting the wave come back into me, because by the time it's in a prime freeze position, then Herald is going to be up pretty soon, and Renekton can just look to get it with his jungler, which I really don't want to be giving that. On Darius, you should be looking to secure Herald with your strength if you can. And here he plays up for the wave because I'm keeping in the middle and we're able to chunk him down. I don't need to kill someone with my ulti. You can always just use your ulti as a chunk and make them base, because if he stayed under the tower at this HP, look how low he is, of course me and Echo are just going to kill him. So that's something you can keep in mind as well. You don't always need to kill someone with your ulti. It's a very good chunking tool, especially if you can proc your 5th stack with it. And here I look to get a really good base off and deny Renekton so much CS based purely from that trade. And now in this position, you see I'm spamming in the Herald, I'm running straight for it, because even though I just had a very favorable trade for my lane, I'm about 10-15 seconds late to this Herald, and I really don't want to be giving it on a strong Darius. However, I'm pretty sure unfortunately in this game they managed to get the Herald, but it's fine. I was still very aware of the Herald timer, and I was playing to fight it, so even though they got the objective, we still got the fight that we wanted. I was still able to use my strong champion in some way, where even though we didn't get the objective itself, we got a very favorable fight for our team. And unfortunately the center gets away, I don't know where he based, and I don't want to be wasting time chasing because I have such a big wave, but that's something you really need to be keeping in mind when you play Darius. Herald is something you have a huge influence over, and you should be using your strength to either secure it for your team, fight them off it, or allow your team to get something on the other side. So here I'll skip forward a bit, Renekton's not even in the lane, but I'm just holding this freeze, denying as much CS as I can, and looking to run him down with my red buff when he comes back. But here I'm pretty sure he didn't show for a while. I was scared he would just roam bot or run mid, so I just broke my freeze. It already did the job, it denied enough CS, I don't need to be holding this freeze forever, and I don't want him to be ganking bot or mid and not losing anything in return, except for a bit of XP. So now I'm just pushing under tower, looking to play for plates and tempo, because I don't want Renekton to get a playoff. And hopefully I have demolished in this game. I do not. Oh, I do. Good stuff. And I'm able to break the plates right in front of him. And then proxy the way between the towers. And now I'm going to get a good base. However, I might stay on the map for Stridebreaker, I'm guessing. Yep, very greedy. And now I'm just looking to take over the enemy jungle, dropping wards, trying to fight the Graves if he goes for it. But he's respected me. He sees I hit the Scrying Bloom. He's not dumb, he's not blind. So he respects, but he's not farming his camps. He's not taking his blue. I'm still pressuring him off his camps, even though in the ideal world he would go for the blue and I'd be able to kill him. That's just not reality, and here I'm able to get behind Renekton. Pretty sure he fought at base, and he's probably going to be a free kill yet again. And I don't even need to use my ulti here. Don't want to waste the cooldown on this guy. And now I can get a really good base off again and get my Stridebreaker. So I'll push the wave in, I'll speed it up a bit. There's no lane opponent, there's no point. And I don't want to be staying in lane too long. Of course he has TP, so I base straight away. I was pretty sure his TP was up. And no, it wasn't. Unlucky. Could have got one extra plate. So now coming back onto the map, my game plan with my Stride Breaker I'm feeling extremely powerful is I want to be breaking my tower as fast as possible. There's no point me wasting time killing this Renekton over and over. I've already got my lead from him, there's no point sitting him even further behind when I need to be impacting this map as soon as I can. And to do so, I first need to break the tower, because I need the long lane so that I can keep Renekton stuck under the tier 2, and I'm going to have a lot more time to work with. So here, that's my game plan. I want to be building a wave and looking to break the tower, but they drop Herald on me for some reason. I have to waste time with this. But for the most part, it's fine. Probably should not have cleared that wave, I regret it. But my Echo is coming. He wants to dive this Renekton, and hey, I'm fine to do so. As long as we can get the tower afterwards, I don't mind. And I'm just looking to poke him as much as I can before my jungler gets here. Well, even though Darius sucks at poking under tower, this guy is just letting me Q him for no reason, so of course I'm going to take that. And now we're able to get the free dive off. Where I let Echo tank because he's got ulti, of course. Darius isn't very good at kiting away from the tower aggro without Ghost, and I don't want to waste my Ghost in this situation. So here we break the tower, and I want to be looking to execute my mid-game strategy as fast as possible, so I base instantly. It's good to base before your lane opponent and stay up in tempo, and I'll explain why now. Now, the main reason it's important to stay up in tempo over your lane opponent, and what I mean by that is basing before them, because in the situation where I broke his tower, if I stayed for one extra wave, stayed for his jungler's gromp, wasted time doing that, and then base after him, even though he is so weak, he's 0-5 on Renekton, he cannot contest me in the lane. If he's in the lane before me, and he pushes the wave all the way under the tower, now the first thing I have to do after coming out of base is run and answer his wave, where during that time he can run, he can make a 5v4 for his team, he can get a fight up in some way and have some impact in the game, where that shouldn't be possible. He's 0-5, I want him to be as useless as possible and have no impact in this game, so why would I base after him and give him that opportunity? Where now that I base before him, I run straight bot, and I run bot because Herald is on the opposite side of me. I want my team to get Herald for free if I get ganked by a couple people, if I draw pressure, and now I can pressure this bot tower before Renekton is even on the map pushing his wave. So now Katarina is the one that answers me actually in this game, but I can destroy him as well, it doesn't really matter. And in this fight, just from one glance from looking at it from experience, this was going to be a messy fight, a 1-for-1, 2-for-2. There's not much point me going there and blowing my sums for a kill. I want to be breaking the tower, getting the wave under the bot tier 2, and then joining this fight. I don't want to be dropping my prio in the lane for this sloppy fight that's not in for an objective, and here I end up coming in the end to help secure the kill on Renekton, but it's very important you don't overcommit to fights that aren't going to be beneficial for you. So mainly when there's a fight set up around an objective, of course that's going to be very good, but when a random fight breaks out in mid lane like that, where it's a sloppy 2-for-2, you know, just both sides trading kills, there's not much point you going there and blowing your summoner spells for no reason if you're not going to be getting a big benefit from it. So here I try to cheese the Sivir, unfortunately it doesn't work out, but my main goal in the mid game is of course to keep my lane opponent trapped under the tier 2 and create a numbers advantage, and here I'm doing just that. Where they've sent Sivir and Senna to answer me, I'm creating a 5v3 essentially for my team, 5v4 actually because Draven's dead, but unfortunately my team makes a big mistake, where they've sent a lot of people to answer me so we should be getting Herald for free, but my Zyra doesn't really understand what's going on and he's wasting time at Dragon, so they're able to collapse and kill my Echo on the Herald, where, and realistically, if they send their full bot lane to answer you on the side, your team should be the one getting the objective on the opposite side. But of course, it's solo queue, your teammate's going to make bad plays, and I actually make one of my own, where even though Echo died, I knew we couldn't get this Herald. I was a little bit annoyed, I felt like we should have been able to get it, so I came to it, but that's just not reality. I should have been hitting to side lane straight away, and looking to create numbers advantage all over again, and hopefully my team would be able to use the next situation I give them. But here I could kill the wave, and I'm on the side of Dragon, which is fine. I'm going to be looking to fight this, and I'm essentially going to be looking to catch someone that heads towards it, where I'm able to catch Renekton here, I'm pretty sure, and now no one's going near me. Of course, I can get a reset off him. I've got my 5 stacks of passive. No one is going to touch me, and I head back to side, because I thought there's no way their team is going to fight this 5v4 versus strong Darius, but they do go for the steal. So I should have been here. Going for that wave was a bit greedy, but I just thought the fight was so one-sided they would be crazy to do so, but they were crazy, so I should have played more disciplined, I'd say. The wave was a bit greedy for no reason. It's just one wave, right? But here we're able to win the fight anyway and get the dragon, so I got the best of both worlds, and I'm able to get the bot tier 2 as a result of that. Which, if you can break the tier 2, even if you're giving tempo, you always should, because this just gives insane amounts of gold. And now you see, I don't want to give too much tempo though. I base straight away, where Renekton is first on the map over me, that's true, but I'm able to get such a big spike, not a spike, but such a big amount of gold off of that tower, that it is worth it. So now coming back on the map, the alarm bells are ringing, Baron is going to be spawning soon, and my team is playing quite undisciplined, they're getting caught a lot, so I really need to be creating a 5v4 situation before the Baron spawns. So to do so, I need to be keeping someone stuck under the bot tier 3 before the Baron's up, and then moving between the lanes and looking to create a 5v4 fight. Because even though my team is playing undisciplined, so is theirs. So if we're able to make the fight a 5v4, of course our team's going to have a much higher chance of winning. And here I trade on the Renekton to force people to react to me. The Sin is chasing me, I'm pretty sure someone else comes. Their Graves hovered, their Graves is there too. They're sending a lot of people to answer me, which allows my team to get the Baron for free. And here, I don't have enough time to push a bot anymore. They're heading to Baron, so I head there as well, and if a fight breaks out, I'm going to be ready, and that's exactly what happens, where I'm able to get a flank here. Like we said, ideally you want to be playing front to back, but I just pulled 3 people to me, and I didn't have time to group to the front, but it's fine, right? I created a numbers advantage, so it's fine for me to flank in this situation. And here, like you see, I'm basing instantly as soon as the fight is done. I hate wasting time, I hate wasting tempo for no reason, so as soon as the play is done, I like to base as quickly as possible, and come straight back onto the map and pressure all over again. So now coming back onto the map, my game plan is to use our Baron to either break inhibs or end the game, but unfortunately it is solo queue, even though I'm the strongest member on our team. No one's playing around me, they are just all fighting without me and getting aced. Probably sounds a lot like your solo queue games, but it's fine, right? As long as you play according to what's happening on the screen, it's going to be fine. If I were to have gone frustrated and fought them here, even though my whole team is dead and I died, there is a good chance we lose this game. But I maintain my discipline, I pressure as much as I can, which is not much because I have no teammates on the map, and I just look to pressure once my team is back on the map ready to pressure as well. So here I'm looking to push my wave under the tower, make someone answer, and fog between the lanes. If my team gets ganked mid, I will fight them, and if someone walks into the jungle, like the center, I'll go onto them. Where it's very pressuring for them to play against. When you're playing 2 lanes with Baron, keeping them Baroned up, and you're taking over the jungle. If they walk into the jungle, you fight them, and if they try to kill someone mid, I'll go there. If they try to kill me, my team will come to me. It's the best way to use your Baron. So here I'm just looking to pressure as much as I can. I'm playing in their face, I'm even queuing them under the tower, but I'm not giving them any range to kill me, of course, and eventually Renekton gives us range, so I'm able to punish for that. And now I would prefer if my team left my lane, they went back to mid, but of course it's solo queue, they don't know where to go, and it's still fine. We're getting these towers down, not as quickly as I'd like, but we're doing the job, right? We're getting the job done, and eventually we're going to look to break inhibs and use that to end the game. We're here, can't actually remember what happens, where I really want to base now. Yep, like I talked about before, I don't want to waste any time, I don't want to waste tempo, I want to be basing as fast as possible, and here, actually, I'm pretty sure they had a ward. Oh, that's right. They had a ward in this bush, so this is a big mistake by me. I didn't take a very disciplined base, I wasted time hanging around, but they overcommitted for me. They overcommitted to stop my base, and we were able to punish them for it, and I'm pretty sure we win the game off this, and luckily I was able to survive that, use my Q healing, and yeah, that's pretty much the game. Where, for the most part, the main reason I won this game, even though I did stomp my lane, that's not the main reason I won this game. I used my pressure very well. I constantly created 5v4 situations, I drew pressure to me, I pulled the enemy champions towards me, and I constantly made this game a numbers advantage for my team using my side lane power. Up next, I'm going to be covering how to play against Darius, so even if you're learning this champion, there's still going to be games where you verse him, and it can help you a lot to know how to play against him. And my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to trade with him. This champion is very good at all in situations where you're both high HP, but he doesn't do very well when you're both low. Especially if you're getting a gank, it's very easy to one-shot him when he's half HP already, but if he's full, he has a pretty good chance of being able to turn it in a lot of situations. And a lot of champions you can trade with him, even a champ like Ornn. You can poke him down with Q, when he's half HP you can look to all in him, champ like Aatrox, you can poke him down, Jax, you can poke him down Q away, so on and so forth. There are so many champions that have the option to trade with him, but I see a lot of players just refuse. They don't want to go near him, they just want to farm out their lane, but if you do that, he is going to have full control of the wave. Which means he can let it come back to him, and he's still full HP because you're refusing to trade with him. It's going to be very easy for him to run you down and get a solo kill in the lane. But if you're willing to brawl with him and learn from your mistakes, get him low, and now you're going to be able to punish him, especially if you play a bruiser that takes Ignite. A champion with Ignite like Riven, a champ like Jax, Renekton, is very, very good versus Darius once you're both low, because you can one-shot him with your full combo and Ignite before he's even able to get 5 stacks down. For my next piece of advice, I recommend rushing tier 2 boots if you're playing a tank champion. Let's say, for example, you're playing Sion, you're playing Ornn, you're playing Cho, and a lot of games you just rush your Barmy Cinder. If you do that against Darius, it's probably going to lead to your death in a lot of situations, because he's going to have tier 2s and you won't, which means it's going to be very easy for him to get onto you and stay onto you. But if you match his tier 2s, now when he walks towards you, you can space that, hit him with your spells, get him low, and now you actually have a chance to win this matchup. Even though it's Darius favored, if he doesn't really understand how to play it and you have tier 2s as well, you're able to space his movement, you actually have a shot. And the same goes for ranged champions, where you're probably going to lose the matchup if you rush something else and he goes tier 2s and he's able to get onto you. Because of course, if you're playing a range champ, you're not really going to win an all-in against Darius. But if you have tier 2s as well, you're going to make it very hard for him to get onto you, and it's going to be easy for you to poke him down and win the lane the way you want to be winning it. And my final piece of advice, and something I see a lot of players make this mistake, even in games where they beat the Darius in lane, is play your team fights with more discipline than you normally would. I see some games where people flash, kill the AD carry in the backline, and they're happy with that, but now Darius gets a free reset off you. You're trading 1-for-1 with the AD carry, which in some games that might actually be good, but versus Darius, it can almost always lead to your team getting wiped, because if he can reset off you, now all of a sudden he can ghost flash towards your team and just one-shot one after the other everyone, because you gave him that reset. Or if you played with more discipline, you spaced him, you made him come to you, or you went back in and went back out, you made it very hard for him to get 5 stacks or an ulti. It's going to be a lot harder for him to play the game he wants to be playing it, and at the very least he's going to have to rely on someone else on your team making that mistake. Now, to wrap up this guide, we're going to be going through the main takeaways, the most important topics I want you to keep into your brain as you're learning this champion. The first one being you are extremely powerful early game. Either use your power to freeze and punish your lane opponent, or push and punish the enemy jungler. Now, the second point being you scale extremely well, especially in a front-to-back setting. Your champion just gets stronger and stronger as the game goes on. The more tank items you get, the more ability you have to do damage and get your full combo off. However, those 2 points may contradict each other, where be okay to scale but also punish the early game. So punish early game if you can, you always should. If you're in a matchup where you can get an early game advantage, you should do so, but some games you just won't be able to. You will either be in a very hard matchup, let's say you're versus Heimerdinger or Vayne, or you're just versus a jungler that's camping you, that wants to shut you down. You should be okay to absorb his pressure without dying, and then scale up nicely into the game. Just because you can get a huge lead in a lot of your games doesn't mean you have to and can in every single game, so be willing to scale when the time calls for it. And the final takeaway, play around your summoner spells. As you're learning this champion, you're going to realize there's a huge difference in power between having your Ghost and Flash and not having it, and you really need to be willing to call your team off fights when you don't have them. Ideally, you want to be setting up your side lane ahead of time, so your lane opponent's stuck on their tower, and then arriving to the fight early, with your Ghost and Flash ready. But if you know your Ghost and Flash is not going to be up for the second dragon fight, you need to be calling your team off the fight ahead of time. You can't be calling them off when they're already looking to fight it, when they're already walking towards it. You need to call them off ahead of time, ping your sums, assist ping the top jungle, let them know you're not going to be going to this dragon, you're going to be fighting topside instead, and fighting at a later date when your summoner spells are back off cooldown. Okay guys, I'm going to wrap it up there, and as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But if not, and you still want to be pushing your Darius to the next level, I strongly recommend watching VODs of XCM, the guy I showed before in the teamfighting section. He is just such a good Darius, and watching him can only make you better, so I cannot recommend him enough. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.